Black Gems, we're back. It's the Black Gems podcast. We out here. Episode 1, it's the pilot. So if you didn't know, my name is Clint Myrick, and I don't want to say I am Black Gems, but for right now I am. I'm dolo by myself. So if you're interested in partnering with the Black Gems podcast, come holler at me. We down here in what's remaining of Club Eastwood, and we recording the podcast because we can. Listen, all you need is a microphone and a laptop to do a podcast, maybe a few ideas, something catchy. Listen, all you got to do is get started. So that's what I'm doing right now. You just got to get started. So thank you all for tuning in. We got a lot that we're going to talk about. So Black Gems, if you've never heard of it, it's a nonprofit organization founded in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 2022. And actually 2025 is when we became official. But we started in like 2021, a little bit unofficially on social media. So what I do, that's why I'm always saying that we're back, because sometimes I take a couple weeks hiatus, because I got a real job. And I send out posts about Black history and Black culture, like things that we should be talking about, right? Things that matter to us. Things that we should be aware of, like history lessons from, our ancestors and people that came before us, right? So they say history is a good lesson, and history is more like a boomerang than it is an arrow. So that's quote is from somebody. Do your research and find out who I got that from. But these things tend to come back. So why don't we learn the lessons the first time, instead of you put your hand in fire once, you don't want to, keep getting burned. So that's kind of how history can help you get through it. So Black Gems, we're back. We're out here. It's the podcast. So what I hope to do during the podcast is really just teach and talk about Black history. We'll talk about things like politics. We'll talk about, regular news stuff. We'll talk about critiques about shit Black people do that just don't make no sense. And we'll talk about white people too. We'll talk about racism. We'll talk about why you need to tune in to Black Gems. We're back. But essentially, you just got to get started. You just got to do something. This is history lessons, things that we just wasn't taught in school. So if you think I know it all, our history for Black folks is too vast. It's too much for one person to know. It's too much to say I know everything. I don't know a lot of things, but I'll teach you what I know. I'll share what I know. Share the information. Share the gems, right? So if somebody drop a gem, I'm sharing it, right? Information is not to be kept. It's not to be harbored. So Black Gems, we're back. Today's topic I've been doing some reading. I've been doing some studying, talking about the Great Migration. Because at the end of the day, I have a mystery that I'm trying to understand, and that's like, how did Black people get up here, right? So people live in places like Milwaukee, Chicago, New York, all these different places, but I don't know if we ever asked the question of why. So, at least I say my generation, right? And probably the parents before us, every summer you would go down south, right? And go visit your family members. Your grandma, you stay the whole summer. You got your grandparents that's there, your great grandparents, they own huge, massive plots of land in the country. And why do we do that? Or for right now, why is that kind of going away? And a lot of that has to do with what topic I want to talk about, which is the Great Migration. So if you don't know, the Great Migration is one of the largest internal movements of people in the United States of America. So it ain't just about Black folks, but it's about American history, where we haven't seen a massive amount of people move to a different state or another area in the United States ever. Great Migration, the time period when we're talking about 1916 to about, I say, 1940. So World War I to about before World War II started. So around those time periods, they call it the Reconstruction area. They call it the Jim Crow area. They call it the Reconstruction. They call it a bunch of different things. They call them the Harlem Renaissance, the start of the Harlem Renaissance. But the Great Migration is basically the kickoff to a lot of those things. So it was said, and here's the history lesson right away. It was said that about 90% of black people in America stayed or resided in the South. 90%. And there were two, main factors in why people moved, up north and to the various corners. And a lot of that, it was what we call the push and pull factor. And the push was kind of easy. Things I think everybody may be familiar with, but just in case you're not, the tension between white and black people, had hit an all-time high, coming out of the end of the Civil War. And then black folks were free in, about 1865. But after that came the black codes. Then after that, something even worse came. And that's the Jim Crow era. And that's the area we all know where black people were being lynched unlawfully. There was black folks getting murdered without getting a fair trial, without proper reasoning, proper policing. Black people were getting. They said that the statistic was a black person died from lynching one black person every 4 days, and that's crazy. And it wasn't like it was the police. This is like regular citizens. You're a regular dentist. You're a regular sharecropper. You're a regular market worker. Imagine the person that work at the corner store at night. He hanging people. That's the kind of America that black folks and white folks lived in during the Jim Crow South era. And the push factor is black folks had to get up out of there. They didn't want to be the next victims for a lynching unjustly, right? It wasn't like we're talking like the worst criminals and there's some kind of death sentence. We're not talking about rapists. We're not talking about murderers. We're talking about regular people that's just trying to live and survive. And those people are houses being burned down, kids being, harassed in the street, folks coming to your neighborhood, to your house, disrupting you. So the push factor was the Jim Crow South, and black folks had to get up out of there. Something else that kind of pushed people out was, access to education. So everything was segregated in the South, and the same type of resources and the same accesses wasn't affordable. So sending your kids to college, that just wasn't a thing, right? Sending your kids to a school that had, the same type of running water, or, this is the time where integration, was happening. But it happened for a reason, because the schools that, the majority of the people in the South went to, you got sud and stuff coming from, pipes, water leaking, don't have accurate, but the push factor, folks had to get out of here. The other part of that is the pull factor. So push and pull. So while things were going so terrible in the South, there was a pull to get people to come up north. Go to a better life. And a lot had to do with what we would think of today as social media, newspapers. So newspapers were a critical way to get information to the masses. So what you would think as a social media story, a post, the newspapers at the time, and there were a lot of black newspapers at the time, but the one that I'm going to talk about, or at least that I learned from the PBS documentary, is talking about the Chicago Defender. So if you didn't know, the Chicago Defender, it was created he was a lawyer from down south who moved up north and could not find work. So something as simple as a janitor's job, like that man couldn't find work. Imagine a person, one of the smartest people in the county, can't find a job. They won't even hire him as a janitor. So he used his last, money that he had to create what we know as the Chicago Fender. He took a pen and some paper, wrote 4 pages, and then from there, history was made. The Chicago Defender is one of the most influential newspapers ever created, ever written in the world. And to this day, there are some papers that are just still trying to catch, how great the Chicago Defender was. So, but not too much about the Chicago Defender, but that news was telling people about, the great things. Hey, it's jobs up north. Please come on north. So that's what you've been told in schools is, hey, there's been jobs, there's healthcare, there's opportunity. Those are things that you have learned in school. But what they didn't tell you is who gave you that information and let you know. And that's the newspapers, the black-owned newspapers, one being the Chicago Defender. Talking about, what else kind of pulled people into these cities. There was no slavery. There was no black codes. There was nothing like the Ku Klux Klan, hanging people up north. Now, read the history books. They will tell you that there has been hangings, but I'm not really finna go into that so much because I don't know all that information. But what I do know was big cities like Chicago, from 90%, over 6 million people moved from down south to up north to cities like Chicago, to Cleveland, Seattle, Los Angeles, California. They moved to places like New York, moved like Cleveland, Philadelphia. So these cities were heavily populated with the new population of black people that moved, up north. And I thought that was pretty cool because y'all know black people. We not finna just move or do nothing on a whim. We ain't scared of a lot of things. But, with the dismal look of the South and people really fearing for their life in a real way, it was time to move. It was time to get up out of there. So you see people sneaking in the middle of the night, hopping on trains just to go to their new city and their new home with, really no more guidance than another black person saying, hey, it's better here. We'll take care of you. We'll help you out. So the Great Migration, y'all. Great Migration. So when it was all said and done, between the ages of, 1916 to 1940, from 90% of black people that was in the South, that changed to like 40% of people moved up north. So somebody like me with my Milwaukee Brewers shirt, how did my family get here? I definitely know the Myrick's moved from Mississippi to Chicago, and somewhere it's from Chicago to Milwaukee. And that's kind of how I got here, right? My mom's from here. My father's from Chicago, and all the Myrick's, they probably still in Chicago, but family dynamics, y'all know that get tricky. But my grandparents are from down south. So if you're Gen Z or Alpha, like your great grandparents were before the Great Migration. So how did you get here? How did you get? All right. So, how did you get here was due to the migration, that push, the Ku Klux Klan, the lynchings, the not access to jobs, the violence, the poverty. Pushed folks out of there, but the pull was the opportunity for jobs, healthcare, welfare, for assistance to get housing, to get schooling, right? Those things became accessible to you up north. So, Great Migration. Now, what does that have to do with today? I see a bunch of people, like I said, history is like a boomerang, right? And it's not my saying, but history is like a boomerang where these things repeat themselves. So what you see right now is people moving back down south, right? So people that live in Milwaukee are leaving to bigger cities down south. One, because it's just cold up here, so I get it. I feel you. But again, it's something about, moving down south that makes people, comfortable. Or even in, some places in the Midwest, colleges have a lot to do with the migration of black people leaving PWIs, predominantly white institutions, moving to cities that have HBCUs. So in Wisconsin, there is not a HBCU that resides. I don't even know what is the closest one. We are far from centric to black people. But yeah, your kids are now, smart enough to go to a HBCU. And, we're seeing a lot of, people kind of go in that direction. And, where you go to schools, sometimes you just stay there, right? If you can find the jobs, you can find an opportunity. You see what life could be like living amongst people that look and sound like you. So wherever those people are, like the Atlantas, the DCs, the Houstons, the Dallas, the Texas, right? Those kind of places where you see more and more black people kind of concentrating together. So it's actually people are migrating back down south from our great migration up north. So I thought that's pretty interesting. We'll see in a couple years, like, how that pans out. So Black Gems, that was our deep dive into education. So still working out the segments, but we're going to give you some gems about something in history. There's other things you can watch. Watch the PBS documentary. You can watch, I don't know right now. Watch Harlem Nights. You can see what came, the after effect of the Great Migration when you talk about arts and all of those things. Anyways, segue into news. So news that y'all probably shouldn't care about, but let's talk about it. I guess we should talk about Charlie Kirk and, how he was, unalived in front of everybody in Utah at a university where he was speaking. And the world kind of exploded. So this is, weeks after. There's been a lot of debate. And I guess this is kind of why I wanted to start the podcast, because I had so much to say. I was writing Facebook posts, and there's only so much you can say in a post. And I wanted to do a 3-minute video, but I was like, man, I need to do a whole podcast about this stuff. I got so much to say. And, for me, I kept telling folks, like, this ain't got nothing to do with black people. Utah? When the last time somebody took a vacation to Utah? You went skiing? Maybe. You went to go see the great outdoors? The only thing black people got to do with Utah is Karl Malone and the Utah Jazz. That's the only black person we know. And that's questionable, what type of black he is, right? He might be more MAGA than MAGA. Anyways, not to talk about Karl Malone like that, but I've heard enough from him. But anyways, black folk, we ain't got nothing to do with that. You know what I'm saying? And, it's crazy because the real life effect was HBCUs were going on high alert for, white folks coming onto their campuses, right? So some HBCUs went on shutdown after seeing the violence that occurred way in Utah, white on white crime. And, folks took precautionary measures. What does black people got to do? Black people ain't got nothing to do with this. And I laugh because some people was like, I'm just going to go to the store. Anybody need anything? This is news we don't care about. But you seen like the NFL, they did moments of silence after they said that politics has no right in the NFL. I guess it has no right to be in the NFL if it's black, if it's Colin Kaepernick taking the knee, if it's a black person singing the Star Spangled Banner, we cool with that. We need your great voices. We need your talent. But when it comes to the injustices that face we didn't have a moment of silence for George Floyd. No, we had like scrutiny and all sorts of other stuff. But this man, we got a moment of silence after he had so much bad things to say about everybody else except his own people. It's funny. White people got a lot of bad stuff to say about other races, but they ain't got a lot to say about themselves and their own history and the negative and bad things that they've done and are still doing, but they talking about everybody else. Ain't that about it? But anyways, I digress. But HBCUs went on high alert. And it's funny because HBCUs was started because, and if you don't know what HBCU is, I don't want to, act like everybody know everything. Historically, black colleges and universities, they were started because of the access to their predominantly white institutions. They was not letting us in. Admission, cost, it was an unwelcoming place. You couldn't I'm in a fraternity. We learn about how you couldn't join any social activities. Like right now, you got centers for your group. They didn't have that back then. Intramural basketball or intramural sports, you couldn't participate in that. There was not such a thing as extracurriculars. You went to school. It's almost crazy that they just want your money. I don't know. But you couldn't do those type of things. So we created our own universities. And it seemed like now they want to come to our universities and raise havoc. Listen, y'all didn't want us at y'all schools. Don't come to our schools trying to start some, relax, leave. And you seen the two white boys that started up they sat in the middle of the lawn and started their podcast, got a lot of recognition. That was their intent. If this is the 90s, they would have got their ass whooped. We're not going to even jack. They definitely deserved the ass whooping, but they was out there with some intelligent black folks, and they knew to just leave those, white folks alone and let security politely escort them off the campus. So those two white gentlemen are trying to exploit black people, and that's nothing new, for their likes and their gains. To come onto our campuses, in our neighborhoods, in our communities, and cause havoc. So you always hear about folks say pick yourself up by the bootstraps. Listen, HBCUs is the ultimate bootstrap we picked up. Leave us alone. So a little bit of news here. Long story short, Charlie Kirk and what happened to him, just fuck around and find out season. Leave people alone and you'll be just fine. You fuck with people and who knows what's going to happen. Y'all pissing people off, right? Y'all taking our country back to a place that we don't want to go with really bad race relations, right? Anyways, Black Gems, we're back. So I press pause. Dang. Oh, I'm back. Okay. I'm tweaking. Look, this is what happened when you ain't got somebody in the studio to help you. You ain't got a producer. So we out here. This is the first episode. So anyways, the next topic that we were going to talk about was the beef between Charlamagne and Dame Dash. And I want to talk to you about that and why that's important to black history, because it's not the first time where black people have been on opposite sides of the same cause. So Charlamagne the God is trying to put people on, right? And he got people coming up to the studio every day. He got a book imprint where he's trying to just progress black people. But Dame Dash is doing the same thing where he's trying to progress black people. And he's been putting people in movies. He's been putting his own kids on. He's just done a lot for the community, but I don't know what it is. But, black folks tend to clash, and this ain't the first time. In history, we've seen the Martin and Malcolm. Granted, Martin and Malcolm, were kind of on the opposite sides of philosophy or something like that. But at its simplest terms, it's just a clash between, black men. We've seen it with Frederick Douglass and Woodson, right? So Carver, sorry, George Washington Carver. So we just seen two sides of the coin throughout history. It's just not the first time this thing has happened. So what we need to do is study when black folks have they're on the opposite sides of the coin. What did they do back then that caused them to have so much conflict, and what can we do today when we see those situations, and how can we get out of those so we can get, better. But I know what everybody's saying. Y'all like, man, fuck Dame Dash. He tripping, right? Like, he disrespectful, he rude. That's why Jay don't fuck with him. That's what people would say. But on the same breath, some other people that don't agree with Charlamagne, like, no, Dame Dash telling the truth. That nigga is gay. Like, all he do is play around with DJ Envy all day and just overstimulate the LGBT community and just a play and joke on it. So I get both sides of it. But at the end of the day, I see two black men that's trying to progress. And black folks, we just be into it just too much. I'll tell you this, though. We all fighting for the same, goal at the end of the day, and that's for the progress of our people. And I think we need to focus in on that goal instead of everything else, right? And I like to use other groups for an example, because they figured it out. Like, you talk about the Jews, they figured it out. They created their own hospitals, like they own churches, they own schools, right? They figured it out. They had one goal in mind, and they came together and they figured it out. And I feel like black people could take a gem from their book. So when black folks, black men especially, come into conflict like that, there's some things that we could do to kind of get better at that. As far as the history on it, it's always a philosophical thing. It's all about money and power versus philosophy and truth. Those two things, if you go back to Frederick Douglass, he talked about like the philosophy, the philosophical, like we need people that can critically think. We need people that are educated. We need people that are willing to see beyond themselves, to make us go forward through education. And that's where I kind of land, right, is I believe if you know better, you'll do better. And then there's the money and power thing where some people was like, listen, I hear what you're talking about. Like, I don't need all that to get this money, right? We're trying to gain power through finances. So let me become a developer, a real estate agent. Let me become a rapper. Let me become a basketball player, because these things generate huge amount of money, and that's the way we're going to progress black people. Listen, this is an age-old conversation. This ain't no different than Frederick Douglass philosophical saying that people need to go to college, and George Washington Carver saying forget college, treat you to trade, get you to the money. It's the same thing. Why can't we have both? I mean, why can't you go to school and do, well, there's that, right? But at the end of the day, black people, maybe what we could do is, like, we are monolithic. One thing isn't better than the other. Like, we need people to go to school to be doctors and nurses and lawyers and educators and politicians. We need people to go to the NBA because we just, you got centuries of just being built strong, tall, skilled. We need people to go to the NFL. We need people to go play soccer, go play hockey. We need people to be astronauts. Like, we could do it all, right? So what I would say to all of that is, black people, don't stop going to school. Everybody can't become a rapper. Everybody can't become an athlete. Don't stop trying to go and do the trades, right? Still teach your kids how to change a tire, right? And I'm guilty of that one, because I gotta, as much as I had to learn, I need to, pass that down to my kids as well on how to change a tire. So you need both of those things, and you can chew gum and walk at the same time. So, but that argument, that was the philosophy about Dame Dash saying that I'm a boss, and Charlamagne the God saying, like, you a clown, you stupid, you ignorant, right? So those two things always clashed. But read about, Malcolm and Martin Luther King. Read about Frederick Douglass, George Washington Carver. I don't know who else. It's probably Fred Hampton and somebody else. Reverend Jackson, maybe. Who else was at the time? It's always two people on separate sides of the J and Dame Dash. There's always two people on the opposite sides of the coin. So just look through history where you can see that, and you'll see that this is no different. But anyways, Black Gems. We're kind of at the end of the segment. It's been about 30 minutes. I wasn't sure if anybody would listen to this. I'm still not sure if this is even something I should be doing. I don't know. Who will care? But at the end of the day, there's some truths to be told about the world. And y'all know me, whether it's popular or not, I'm going to say it and tell it how it is. So hopefully you'll tune in again for Black Gems. Hopefully I'll try to, it'll get better as time goes. But we're out. Black Gems.